Good morning and welcome to our featured session on sports betting. Hope you all are enjoying convention so far and you had safe travels in. Certainly, I think we have an impactful conversation ahead. My name is Clint Hunkebrow and I serve as our Managing Director of Enterprise Risk Management at the NCAA National Office. Been with the National Office for 15 years. And I oversee a lot of what we call our harm reduction strategies as it relates to sports betting for the National Office. Educational programs, social media monitoring for abuse, a lot of collaborations that we've established with third parties. And we'll go through a lot of that information with you all today. But before we dive in, just wanted to start with a few housekeeping items. First, we would welcome any questions that you all have for us as we go through the session. If you look on the screens to our left and right, there are a couple different ways for you to text and message in questions throughout the session. I can't promise that we'll get through all of them because we certainly have a lot of information to share with you. But to the extent that we don't get through all of them, they'll be really helpful for us to kind of understand what burning questions you all have within the membership and additional resources that we could provide to you in this space. I would also encourage you, if you have the NCAA Convention app, after the session is concluded, to take the survey that we have on the app and certainly open any feedback that you may have on this topic, future educational sessions that we could provide, etc. So again, welcome. I think we have a really impactful discussion for you all today in this space of sports betting. So, we're now obviously in a position since the Supreme Court overturned PASPA in 2018, where we have just seen a rapid expansion of sports betting in America. We're now in a position where 39 states, plus here locally in the District of Columbia, have legalized sports betting in some form or fashion. We've also seen a lot of offshoots that have sprung up over the last couple years, from social betting apps to daily fantasy sites to more recently prediction markets. And we're going to talk through some information about what those are and certainly why you may be concerned about those within your institutions. So with that, I will start by just welcoming my esteemed panelists here. I thought we would get started by just kind of going down the aisle here, if you all don't mind introducing yourselves, talking about your work at the National Office, and specifically how it relates to this topic of sports betting. Austin?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Austin Mayo. I'm an assistant director in our Office of Government Relations right here in D.C. Thank you all for coming. So from a state relations perspective, sports betting has really been top of mind for about the last 2 years or so. It really started with our work in the state of Ohio. We had been hearing reports and complaints from coaches and staff members and student athletes about issues relating to prop bets and just harassment in general of student athletes. So that harassment can come in the form of social media via Instagram comments or TikTok direct messages, even Venmo payment requests from angry bettors that lose bets. So this has been a topic that's been very important to us. From a relations perspective, we've kind of attacked this in two different ways. On the one hand, we focused on individual college prop bets and having states ban those. An individual college prop bet is essentially a bet on a specific student athlete. So it's not betting on, say, Indiana to win the college football playoff. It's not even how many points the team will score, their over-under or something like that. It's specifically about, say, how many passing yards Mendoza will have in the next game or something like that, or how many rushing yards the running back will have, those types of things. So we've looked to states and asked them to ban those. Those come in different ways, whether that's through state law or through commission changes. In 2024, we had 4 states successfully overturn that, which was great news. And we're continuing to still see states consider prop bets either through a state legislative change or through a gaming commission change. On the other hand, the other way that we've attacked this issue is by focusing on the harassment element. So making sure that states have adequate definitions of what harassment actually is, as well as how they can better understand, okay, if a student athlete is being harassed, how can we make sure that that bettor cannot do that in the future, whether we use involuntary exclusionary bettor lists or other mechanisms on that front. So from a relations perspective, those are the two main ways that we're addressing this issue and helping protect student athletes, coaches, staffs, and everyone in between.
Great, thanks. Jake, thanks for flying across the pond to be with us today. Can you talk about who you are and some of the work that Signify does?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jake Marsh, head of sport at a data science firm based in London. We've been working with the NCAA since 2024 across a number of D1 championships. Our work primarily focuses on monitoring, detecting and investigating online abuse and threats, targeting not just athletes, but coaches, game officials, even committee members. We use artificial intelligence to do that. We have our own proprietary algorithms, and we're monitoring all social media, all the main platforms for about 22 different types of abuse and threat. Some of them are obviously quite obvious to you: racism, homophobia, sexism, misogyny. We're also looking at body shaming, violent abuse and threats. And the way we do that is to say we're monitoring it across all social media platforms, and the athletes benefit from this by not having to do anything. So our technology works by just having the athletes' handles and their names, and it doesn't interfere with their data. So it doesn't interfere in anything they do with NIL or with their friends, et cetera, et cetera. We are purely concerned with what's coming at them. And once we've detected it, we have internal threat analysts that are then risk assessing every single piece of verified abuse or threat. And the reason they're doing that is because we then tier it in terms of severity and concern. If it's not too concerning, but it is verified as abuse, we report it to social media platform for action. Am I allowed to swear on this platform? So
Keep it PG.
To keep it PG, to give you an example, you've had a shit game, that's going to be, it's not nice, but it's general abuse. The athlete might take that to heart, but it is general abuse, and that's how the platform will classify it. They're probably not going to do anything about it. When you start ramping up the severity in terms of homophobic abuse, racism, and threat, we're then looking to escalate our own actions, and that's how we work with Clint and Mark in particular at the NCAA. And so when we're doing that, we are then tasking our in-house investigators to find out who that person is sending that piece of abuse. That's the sole mission in terms of what we're doing as a business really is to tackle online abuse, show there's consequences and there's actions. And some of those actions which we've carried out with Clint and Mark, have been working closely with institutions. Unfortunately, there's been student-athlete or student-athlete death threats that we've had to deal with campus police and security, all the way through to engaging with law enforcement, when there's been a death threat against a committee member, for example, or an athlete. And it's really, the work with the NCAA, apologies if I repeat anything, I was on a panel just now, as Clint said, I've had a long flight. But the NCAA has been fantastic in this area. Everyone knows about social media abuse and what athletes face. Believe it or not, there still aren't a lot of sports bodies that are doing something about it. I think, you see various sports doing a tick box exercise, saying that they've just got something in place that can help social media abuse. What the NCAA have done is take real leadership on this issue, a real stance on it, and it's been fantastic working with these guys over the last few years. Aside from that taking action element, against the perpetrator of the abuse, we also do a lot of work with our clients around education. So helping athletes and organisations understand how to manage social media abuse when it occurs, how to spot the signs of an athlete receiving fixated communicated threat, i.e. potentially a problematic stalker in real life, how they can understand the warning signs in their messages. It might not be overt, it could simply be the volume of abuse that they receive over 3 weeks. They might think it's a fan, someone who really thinks they're great, might be innocent. We help them understand that actually these are things you need to report. And then lastly, we provide a lot of analysis. We've got so much data. So some of the things Austin was just been talking about, we've helped the NCAA with its positioning on sports betting, on prop bets, using our data to show regulators and betting operators as well that actually this is an issue that needs to be taken action against. And one thing on that, what I will say, actual regulation change is no small feat, particularly when it comes to the betting industry. So the fact that it's been achieved by this team here is absolutely, I think it's absolutely incredible. You know, I come from Europe. We've had betting a long time. We kind of watch what's happening over here with you all. And it's like we did that 25 years ago, like the Wild West of the betting industry. But the regulation piece is really key. Like when we first heard that states were banning or will ban punters, sports bettors, for sending abuse to athletes, that is absolutely fantastic. We're so way off that in the UK. It does show that action can be taken at a really high level across the board. That's us. A lot of our work is published with the NCAA. You can go on the sports betting part of the website and see our reports and just see how sports betting is affecting athletes in this area.
Great, thanks for that, Jake. Mark?
Good afternoon, or good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Hicks. I work in our enforcement staff in our enforcement department, and I serve in a role of somewhat of an advisor, but also an external connection to the betting industry. So while I help and work with our investigative teams on integrity matters and prohibited bettor issues and things like that, I do spend a significant amount of my time interacting with people from daily fantasy, sports betting operators, et cetera, to make sure that we have a real understanding of how that industry works and how those intersections come into play with the NCAA, whether at the campus level or even in the national office. Help somewhat in the strategic side of things as well, working with Clint and others, Carrie, and we have a team, internal team, that everyone has their hands in sports betting to some degree, depending on what department you're in. And one of the roles that Clint and I serve at the national office is to bring all those people together to make sure that we're communicating internally, horizontally, vertically, the whole works. So I'll get into some other remarks later, but certainly a pleasure to be here today.
Great, thanks. Carrie?
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to be here with you today. My name is Carrie Wheelhouse. I am the Director of Health Promotion in the NCAA's Sports Science Institute. So the Sports Science Institute really works in a lot of the health and safety side of things. So we work with the Committee on Competitive Safeguards and Medical Aspects of Sports, also known as CSMAS, because that is so much easier to say. But we work with this member-led committee to advance the NCAA's mental and physical health, safety, and performance strategic priorities. So when we're talking about sports betting, a lot of that has to do with mental health. There's a large focus on mental health in that health component, and we work to help develop guidance and educational resources for the membership, and also then share that with the membership in ways that can be digestible, understandable, and help you all put them into action on your campus.
Great, thank you. And we'll stay with you, Carrie. As you just mentioned, certainly this has been a topic of conversation within the Sports Science Institute, more broadly with CSMAS. Can you talk about some of the key risks that have been identified as it relates to gambling generally, but sports betting specifically as well?
Yeah, thanks, Clint. This is a really, really great question, because as you mentioned earlier, harm reduction has really been a big part of the conversation over the last year. And so what we mean by harm reduction is the strategies and things you can do to help reduce gambling or sports betting related harms. But the first part of that conversation is really understanding what are some of the risks and what are some of the harms. And so as CSMAS has talked about this issue and the membership broadly, we've really come to this categorization of harms in three big buckets, or three main areas, and those are integrity concerns, social pressures, and health impacts. And the other thing to know about these risks or potential harms are that they can be multi-level, meaning they don't just happen in one way or just at one point in time, and they can be, as this diagram here shows, sometimes complex and intertwined as well. And so to break this down a little bit for you, when we're looking at multiple levels, one thing that we can do is look at the individual athlete, so one individual athlete. And one of the types of health impacts we may see there is an individual athlete who's experiencing problem gambling behavior, or even something rising to the level of a diagnosable mental health condition called gambling disorder themselves. And we can see from our NCAA Office of Research study and data that while most student athletes can engage in gambling or sports betting in ways that is not problematic, there is a small percent of them who are experiencing more problematic or more risky ways of doing that, things like more frequent betting or higher amounts of money lost in one day, or even kind of withdrawing from social aspects of that and now betting or engaging in gambling alone. And so that's one type of thing that we can see. When we look more at the interpersonal level, so a relationship that a student athlete has with someone else on campus, we can also see, or a relationship someone has off campus as well, we also see that there can be these social pressures. And one way that we can see that happening is through harassment or negative messaging towards the student athletes that's coming from someone who's bet, even if that student athlete isn't engaged in betting or gambling behavior themselves. And so that's another thing that we're seeing, and our research and data are showing that student athletes are reporting getting negative or threatening messages on social media from people who have been betting, or even getting approached by other people on campus saying that they won or lost a bet based on that student athlete's team's performance. So more of those kind of social pressures and interactions coming through. And then at the broader level, there can be integrity concerns, things like match fixing or point shaving or insider information. And I'll let some of my other colleagues up here speak to some of those. But again, from the Sports Science Institute and CSMAS standpoint, health impacts or those health concerns are really the things that our focus area has been on, and again, particularly around mental health. And just so some key things for you to think about as we're doing this, when we look at mental health, we know that emerging adulthood is really an important and critical time period around mental health. And so the things that are protective factors or risk factors for mental health can be really impactful on a student athlete at that particular time in development. So something to pay attention to given the age range that they're all in. But we also know that harassment is associated with negative mental health outcomes, and that social media and sports betting have different potential risk factors that can impact this. And so again, really a lot of intersection here between gambling, sports betting, and mental health, and opportunities to help support student athlete mental health.
Thanks so much, Carrie. As you mentioned, certainly one of the key risks that we're focused on is on the integrity side. Mark, you're our lead, our expert there. We sort of joked in the prep session that we're trying to keep these answers to 5 minutes. I think Mark could literally go the rest of the session, probably the rest of the day, to talk about some of the integrity challenges that we've seen in college sports and more broadly across professional sports landscape in this space. But Mark, can you just sort of in a nutshell walk through what are some of the key integrity risks and challenges that you're seeing both within college sports as well as professional sports? And then more specifically, there's been a lot of conversation around prediction markets recently. Can you talk about what those are and why our campuses should be concerned?
Sure. You're right. The list of items we could cover probably would rival Santa's list. Goes a long way down the floor. 2025 is certainly a year to remember on the integrity side of things. Integrity concerns are not new to the NCAA. Over the last 60 years, we've averaged an integrity issue about one every 4 years. And we oftentimes forget pretty quickly, we move on to the next one about something that happened maybe a decade ago or that. But 2025 was unrivaled when you think about the issues that we have faced as an association specific to match manipulation in the sport of men's basketball. But in adding that to what the NBA has seen around insider information and then the manipulation of prop bets, and then also with Major League Baseball, where they are also dealing with a match manipulation prop bet issue there. All those are alleged. I don't think they've all been adjudicated or resolved, but nonetheless, that's a lot for sport, period, in this year. And so, for us specifically, I think we've not seen the scope of integrity issues that we've had this past year, since 1959 to 1961. Were some pretty widespread gambling issues. Obviously, that was unregulated space. It involved organized crime and that type of thing. So I don't think since that period of time we've had anything that looked like 2025. Additionally, on top of just the integrity concerns and things that we've seen, we continue to see a rise in our prohibited bettor issues. Prohibited bettor meaning violations of bylaw 10.3, things you can bet on, things you can't bet on, et cetera. So, and they're generally technical violations. They're not necessarily connected to integrity, but those continue to increase. And I think there's some obvious reasons why. The regulated betting market has gotten really good at detecting proxy betting, and that's important for all of you on campus because the betting operators have to ensure that people in most states, all but 21 and under, are not allowed to bet. And so what do people do? It's kind of like using a fake ID. I've used that analogy many, many times. They use someone else's account. These are young people on your campus, and it's absolutely not specific to athletes. That's happening all across campus. They may use their family, their parents' accounts, friends, significant other, et cetera. But the betting operators are getting really good at detecting that. They have a lot of tools at their disposal. Those get reported to us. And then products like ProBet and others that many of you across the membership have employed to help in monitoring. And so that reveals some. Anyway, long way of saying, I think we're seeing more because I think the detection process has really improved. 2025 was also big for other things. We have a really intensive debate about what our rules should be, and that took twists and turns. That's a product of, again, the attention that I think that our community has really raised. I think credit to President Baker for just raising the profile of these issues, period. And I think that's the leadership part, Jake, you were talking about, because that's also seeped into professional things, whether it's harassment or just prop bets, predictive markets, whatever. He continues to raise those for public awareness, and I think that's been a great benefit. But it also means then we look internally at things like what our rules should be, right? The other thing that's happening that I'm really excited about is our membership is starting to look at what the penalties should be, and we've done that before, but now we're starting to take a really fresh look at, are there ways to help people as opposed to just punishing them, right? And we're not talking about where the integrity line is, but we're talking about prohibited bettor. We've got young people betting on pros that may be developing a problem, maybe not, but it's now that we're monitoring it, it gives us the ability to see it and hopefully deal with that. And so I'm excited about kind of some of the things we're doing on the legislative side as well. And then lastly, from an industry perspective, Clint said there's 39 states. Missouri just went live. That's their most latest state. Daily fantasy is alive and well. You may know of terms like or entities like Prize Picks or Underdog. We're seeing record profits in both the sports betting areas and in the daily fantasy. But we have seen now the emergence of predictive markets. And for us, collectively as a membership, that started in March of 2025. And you started to see predictive markets offer NCAA contests. In that particular instance, March Madness, you could actually trade on the outcome of games there. And then we've seen the predictive market gold rush, if you will, just skyrocket from that point forward. And it's not unique to college. It's involving our pro colleagues as well. But it is a really big topic that we should all be focused on. You should familiarize yourself with this issue. What does it mean for us? It means that you would essentially have now legalized sports wagering of some sort in all 50 states. So we go from 39 overnight to 50. The age limit is 18. So people in high school are coming to you having already engaged in on platforms like Kalshi or Polymarket or crypto. So they're already doing that. These things are often confused with investing. They're connected to investing apps. So there may be even confusion of young people, student athletes or prospects, of what they're actually doing and engaging in, right? And lastly, from a predictive market perspective, the thing that I personally feel is alarming is you don't have the same regulatory function that the sports betting operators are subject to in those 39 states. The CFTC does regulate predictive markets, and that's good. That's better than offshore or illegal bookmakers. But those same protections and those same regulatory requirements are not the same. So we don't have responsible gaming tools. They don't have to report mandatory reporting to state regulatory bodies, to gaming commissions, and so I think that's really alarming for us because it's truly just now really wide open, which is one of the reasons we've highlighted as an extremely important topic for the NCAA for President Baker.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark. I will say to all of you interested in the sport prediction markets, certainly stay tuned to President Baker's speech tonight. There's going to be more announcements of some work that we're going to do to address that space. So we'll move on next to Jake. You've already done a good outline of our work with you all on our NCAA championships. Can you kind of zoom out and talk a little bit more broadly around trends that you're seeing across the different sports partners you work with on social media abuse and harassment, and specifically how it relates to sports betting? And I think we've already blown through the PG rating for this session, but I will caution some folks on some of these slides. We have some examples of different messages that signify as flagged. They certainly are alarming. We share them only to raise awareness around the issues that we're seeing. So with that, Jake, take it away.
Yeah, so, apologies believe it or not, these aren't even some of the worst ones that we see. Quite depressing that this is my daily job, to be honest, but unfortunately you become quite immune to it, and so do our analysts, but we've got that bigger mission of doing something about it, which obviously helps. I think the key thing for student athletes, I was asked a question on the last panel, is what we see different for student athletes to professional athletes? And the clear answer is absolutely not. And even more so when it comes to sports betting. Your favourite NFL players, MLB players, MLS players, they're going to be getting the same types of abuse that are being sent to student athletes. And we know that because we monitor it and we see it. As I said, we monitor 22 different types of abuse. Sports betting and corruption is part of that. So, if someone is not experiencing racist abuse or homophobic abuse, but or people are piling onto them about their performance and talking about betting or talking about, something being rigged, we are detecting that. And that's quite key because the volumes of content that athletes can receive can also impact their mental health. And if their mental health impacted, then their performance could be impacted as well. The levels of sports betting related abuse that we see in the NCAA is similar to what we see in professional sports. For a Grand Slam tennis tournament, you might see that sports betting part of the pie chart at around 15%. For soccer, it might be 10%, 11%. For tennis, in terms of tours, it's going to be higher. But one thing is clear, is that when there is betting interest on a sport, any sport, there's going to be social media abuse, without a shadow of a doubt. That part of the pie chart is going to come to the fore. And we can say that because we see that, obviously we understand the betting markets, that's my old background. But for, sports that don't have high liquidity betting markets, say women's volleyball, you won't see that level of sports betting abuse. What you will see are high levels of sexist and misogynistic abuse targeting the female athletes and body shaming and issues like that. This trend is not going away. As long as sports betting exists, this is going to occur. And one of the key things around it are the two types of abuse and the motivations around why someone is targeting your athlete connected to sports betting. So they're going to do it either in the open source data, which we proactively monitor, or they're going to do it in the athlete's DMs. And that's again key. So someone who's sending abuse or threats over open source data, they're attention seeking, they're venting, connected to losing money. They want people to see it. They want people to, pile on and et cetera, et cetera. Once they've posted that, they're not really going to be thinking about it. And they probably do it across multiple sports that they're betting on. So, the motivation is different. As soon as someone goes into sending communications to an athlete in their DMs, the motivation is different. The motivation is to get inside that athlete's head and affect their mental health. Again, that could affect their performance. It could affect their willingness to perform. And I can give you a couple of examples of this. So I can't say I can say what sport, it was tennis. I won't say who, obviously, or what competition. But, we've had, actually, I don't even need to limit it to tennis. We've got lots of examples of this. Someone sending a death threat to a player's 2-year-old daughter the night before she plays a big game, purely with the motivation of putting her off that match because that person is betting on it. That happens a lot. And that person is deliberately trying to affect the performance of that player. And that motivation from an angry sports bettor is key. Now, what is happening when you see athletes, including student athletes, talking about social media abuse? They're talking about what they're receiving in their DMs. Any athlete who goes to a journalist and says, I want to talk about social media abuse, it's because what they're receiving in their DMs. And, institutions, if they haven't got in place a strategy around social media abuse, not just connected to mental health support, because athletes do need it, but in terms of reporting channels and then risk assessment, investigation, so the athlete can see that it's being handled effectively. If that's not in place, the types of messages you've seen here, worse messages, are being sent to athletes with nothing being done, with no redress, no mitigation. So education of athletes in terms of what they're receiving, and also policy and process is really critical, in this area. But going back to it, we've got so many examples of how sports betting affects people sending abuse to become more violent in their abuse, in their threats, more extreme, and I mean a lot of it is really quite shocking. And the other thing is we also get asked a lot of the time, well, how can you identify someone who doesn't want to be found? If someone's sending a death threat to a 2-year-old child, surely they're going to make sure that you can't identify them. Well, you'd be surprised, and we know that from working together. We've had a case with, I won't obviously go into details, we had a case with the NCAA with a committee member, and person, I've got your address, I'm coming there, I'm on my way, I'm going to burn your house down, I'm going to kill your wife, etc., etc., etc. Identified the person within an hour, and then the police are turning up. So, action, a little bit like integrity issues, action can be taken against this, and it does have a deterrence effect. We work with lots of football clubs around the world, soccer clubs, and our data has shown that once an institution takes control of this issue, communicates about it, they're doing something about it, talks to their athletes about it, clear education and process strategies in place, abuse goes down. It can go down. Types of abuse, we've seen at a particular football club, homophobic abuse go down by 90% from their own fans, because they know if they send something, chances are it's going to get detected. But just one last thing, when it comes to sports betting match fixing, you said about obviously prediction markets, the kids essentially don't really know what they're doing. I think that's true of social media abuse as well. It's become this thing where, if there's no consequences, people don't think there's anything wrong. I can't walk down the street, say to someone, I'm going to kill them, and then slur them with racist abuse or homophobic abuse. Why should you be able to do it online? But I don't think people understand that. And so the education of the fan and the student athlete themselves around this is key as well, and there's not enough of that in terms of that kind of support and education.
And I appreciate you sharing that example, because I think a lot of folks think of the betting-related abuse as happening after a competition is done. You cost me $10,000 on my bet, pay up, or whatever it might be. But certainly we're, to Jake's point, we're seeing a lot of messages that are ahead of time, just trying to get into an athlete's head for purposes of betting. We're also seeing messages at halftime even that student athletes are receiving from folks that are engaging in betting and want to distract that person at the halftime mark of a game. So thanks a lot for sharing those examples. Austin, you had talked about some of the priorities of government relations, some of the initial progress that have seen in states like Ohio. Can you put a finer point on that, really over the last 12 months? What are some of the key sort of wins that we've seen across different states, some of the primary issues that states are reacting to as we advocate?
Yeah, so on the prop bet issue, it started off with Ohio, and a few gaming commissions, really with minimal contact from us, took the initiative on their own to also change their commission rules. In Ohio, we petitioned, and there was a little bit of a process. The sports books had a comment period and everything like that, and ultimately their gaming commissioner and the team decided to ban individual college prop bets. Strictly for college athletes, not for pro athletes. And this was a significant number, too. The sports books reported that, they were taking between 0.7 and 2.4% of all bets were college prop bets. So this is, aggregated over the course of a year. Those could be tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of bets. Afterwards, we saw Louisiana, Maryland, and Vermont also follow suit. This was all throughout 2024. In 2025, we saw states also look at the harassment issue as well. So West Virginia passed a law expanding, their definition of harassment and what they could do with exclusionary bettor lists. More recently, after multiple conversations with the state of Wyoming, their gaming commission expanded their harassment definition, in part because of what they saw in West Virginia. So now kind of the lay of the land is we're going to these states individually. Some are telling us, hey, we want to see it through state legislative action. Other states, the gaming commissions are saying, hey, we'll handle this on our own. We'll kind of have discussions, have an open comment period through petitions and other things. So it's really exciting time. I think one of the interesting things is, there was certainly a rush to market following PASPA, and I think now, after the first few years, I think a lot of states were hesitant to open up their gaming laws. This goes for any type of legislation. States, after they pass something, sometimes want to take a break. They don't want to address it right away. I mean, with specifically with gambling too, the beneficiaries of it, right? Lottery funds and all these different education funds, all these different things are in play as well. So they're sometimes hesitant to open up. But I think we're at a point now where between the student athletes and coaches talking about the harassment they're facing, I think states are finally opening up to saying, okay, this legislative cycle in 2026, we're more open to talking about ways that we could open up this law, make some amendments and those types of things. So we're certainly excited for that. Mark talked about there's 39 states in D.C. that have legalized sports gambling in some capacity, but that still leaves 11 states that haven't. If your state is going to be open for session at some point in 2026, it is extremely likely, if they haven't passed sports betting already, there at least will be a bill to pass. That doesn't necessarily mean anything will happen. Last year, we only had Missouri pass, so it's certainly kind of, falling off a little bit. But, major markets like Texas and California have not legalized yet, so that's something that we'll be watching out for as well. And we'll also be watching out for states that do legalize. How are they going to address not just prop bets and harassment, but things like in-state betting on in-state college teams, the age in which you can bet, will they have harassment definitions? So those are all things that we're monitoring this year. And aside, just other things to look out for, even states that have legalized. 39 states have legalized sports betting. A significant smaller amount have legalized iGaming, which is essentially casino betting from your phone, so slot machines, table games, all those types of things. So we'll certainly be monitoring that as well. That's just another way that students, particularly on college campuses, could get into the gaming space aside from sports betting. So we'll be monitoring that along with if there's any federal or state regulation on the predictive market front as well.
Great, thank you. Well, you all have done, I think, a tremendous job of laying out some of the challenges, some of the trends that we're seeing from a sports betting standpoint across the college landscape. Can you leave our participants with a little bit of optimism, a little bit of solutions? What could they take back to campus, start to implement to guard against these risks? And then what are some of the resources that might be available to them as they get started? We'll start with you, Carrie, and work our way down the line.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and happy to have more slides of optimism and takeaways than challenge. So we're heading in the right direction there. So I'll start by just reiterating a lot of the emphasis around the health, safety, and performance piece has really been on mental health. And as Jake noted, mental health can intersect with other aspects around performance as well, certainly. So the first thing I will highlight as a resource is the NCAA mental health best practices. So the NCAA mental health best practices provide evidence and consensus-based guidance for member schools about how to support student-athlete mental health and how to promote well-being. And they are association-wide legislation, meaning all schools, divisions 1, 2, and 3, need to have mental health services, resources, and education for their student-athletes consistent with the mental health best practices. So these were updated in 2024 to explore two main things. One, the intersection of identity and mental health, and also emerging topics such as sports betting and mental health. And when the update came out, there were two big pieces or chunks of the mental health best practices. The first are these foundational principles, which really help understand more about risk and protective factors for mental health. So the things we talked about earlier around like emerging adulthood as a really critical time period, and knowing that discrimination and harassment are things that can negatively impact mental health. That's really what the foundational principles talk about. But then there are also the 4 best practices, and these are things that campuses can do and put into action to help support their student athletes. The first is all information about how to create healthy environments that promote well-being and support mental health. The second is about how to identify student athletes who might be experiencing mental health signs and symptoms, and talks about how you can use validated screening tools as one way to identify student athletes who might be experiencing those mental health symptoms. The third best practice talks about action plans. So really is, once you've identified a student athlete that is experiencing some type of mental health symptom, how do we then refer them to someone who can help? How do we get them more support? And so the action plans are things that help schools have that process of referral or getting additional support for both routine mental health scenarios or situations and emergency ones as well. And then the last best practice really talks about the licensure of mental health providers, meaning that those people who are doing more formal evaluation and management of mental health conditions, including things around student athletes who may have experienced harassment and be now having mental health conditions, or those who have problem gambling themselves, really the people who are doing the evaluation and management of that are people who are licensed and practicing within their scope. So that's the gist of the mental health best practices. It is broad, and so one thing we heard from the membership more and more was, this is great, but what does this mean in the context of sports betting? How do I do this for sports betting? So in 2025, CSMAS approved an additional resource called Harm Reduction Considerations for Gambling and Sports Betting in Collegiate Sports. And what this is really a put it into action tool that helps schools have resources for understanding how do we put these mental health best practices in action on campus specific to sports betting. So it talks a little bit about some of the risks and potential harms that we went over already. But then for each of those 4 mental health best practices I talked about, it gives specific resources that are available on our website for schools to know what are some of the things I can use to help around education. Maybe that's research data that I want. Maybe that's educational programming that can come to campus. And all of those resources are there. It gives opportunities for screening tools that can be used to help identify student athletes who might be experiencing mental health conditions related to sports betting. And so again, it serves as sort of a one-stop shop for figuring out how to apply the mental health best practices related to sports betting on campus. In addition to this document that came out, in 2025, CSMAS also approved several other resources, and all of those can be found on the Mental Health Best Practices landing page. These 3 here are just a snippet of some of them. There's plenty more. Things like hotlines, for example, are available on this landing page as well. But just a few examples for you here. There's 2 resources that are intended for licensed mental health providers who are working with student athletes that might be coming to them to say, hey, I think I have a problem with gambling behaviors, or hey, I've really experienced some harassment here and I'm not quite sure how to proceed. So those are geared towards licensed mental health providers for tools and understanding about how to screen and further kind of evaluate those types of things. And then this other one here is the Canadian Center's Lower Risk Gambling Guidelines. And what those do is provide some education around where gambling or betting activities might shift away from that more responsible or less likely to be associated with harm into the these are more harmful, more risky ways of engaging in that type of activity. So some great resources that are also available on the mental health best practices landing page. Lastly, we also have a webinar series called the SSI Spotlight, and this is where our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Dina Casiro, invites guests from the membership, subject matter experts and researchers to come talk about various different topics. And so one of the ones we hosted was the SSI Spotlight on gambling and sports betting. In this particular series, there's a great combination of understanding the research, understanding how problem gambling behavior might present in a student athlete or what to look for, and some of the educational resources that are available. And I will just also note that it's not on a slide yet because it's not yet available, but we do have some more fact sheets in production specifically around the intersection of mental health and gambling and sports betting. So those will be forthcoming in the spring here, and so keep your eyes out to look for those as well.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Mark?
Yeah, a couple resources I can point to, and I think they'll slide up there in a bit. We have a sports betting landing page or website on ncaa.org. There you have the membership toolkit, so resources that are really geared towards your compliance staff. We try to keep a library of resources that will make their lives easier to be able to produce, things for student athletes and staff, and we'll update that from time to time. We have our e-learning modules connected there. It's a place that you can go on ncaa.org to find almost anything related to sports betting that you might want. So I want to plug that. A lot of the conferences have engaged, again, third-party entities to help with education and things like that. If you're one of those conferences, I would encourage you to absolutely take advantage of that. There's not enough messaging. It can't be too little of that. And then we have a deal with Epic Global Solutions that does lived experience, and I don't know if you guys are going to talk about that some, but those are just some resources that come to mind quickly. But what I really want you to think about are a couple more pointed things towards integrity. If you're a Division I school that's maybe smaller in profile, here we are in January, you're having a losing record or you're right at it, those are the hallmarks of programs that have been infiltrated by individuals looking to manipulate matches. And it's going to go like this. Someone's going to contact one of your student athletes through social media or through a friend, through a connection, and say, hey, you want to make some money on the game? One of two things will happen. They'll say, yes, tell me more, and we have seen that, and we're dealing with that. The other thing is they'll say, I'm not interested, or maybe they won't respond at all. And then they don't bring that to your attention. So what does that person do who's contacted the student athlete next? What do they do next? They go to the next student athlete. And if it's not at that program, they're going to go to another program. And they build a web, and they're trying to get to your student athletes. The thing that we all have to change collectively is raising awareness when you've been approached for inside information or to match fix. And that's going to look different on every one of your campuses. You're big, you're small, you're gigantic. Some of your coaches have great relationship with student athletes. Some of them don't have a good relationship with student athletes. But you need to think about who your student athletes are talking to. Academic staff, your weight training staff, your trainers. Those people have to be part of your army to combat match fixing. We have to get awareness of these issues as they come up. So elevate it through campus security, call me, call Clint, call your commissioner, your compliance person, get that information to where it needs to go. And if you don't know, just raise it and we'll figure it out. So that's important. That's if you're any school, but particularly we've seen, again, smaller schools starting to have maybe a losing season or a not, less successful season, not going to make the tournament, not going to be NBA players, limited NIL resources. You're a target. But no one's immune. If an NBA player who's making $20 million a year gets involved in moving inside information, potentially fixing their own prop markets or prop bets, there's not an NIL deal on this planet that's worth $20 million a year. So don't be fooled to think, oh, our kids make big NIL money, they'll never do this. Sorry for the sobering comments after your good resources.
Bring it back down.
Sorry. But it's truth. I mean, these are things that we all need to hear and think about. It is very easy for student athletes to bet on their own contests. And again, you can do it through daily fantasy. Those are performance metrics that you're engaging, you're playing the game on. And there's certainly prop bets. We've talked about it. It's one of the reasons Austin doing all the amazing work he's doing is because it's so easy just to bet on yourself. And it may start off with betting on myself because I feel really good about it, but now you got two motivations: to win the game, but also do what I need to do to pad my stats, or I get in trouble and decide, I know I'm not going to play well. I'm going to take myself on the under today. And that's a bad recipe. But it's so easy today for student athletes to do that. I think, primarily that would be my message. Followed by this one final point is, and I hope there's a lot of administrators in here, your compliance people are doing a great job. And knowing the rule, 10.3, is really important. But it really is not an athletic compliance issue. It's the coaching staff, the administrators, it's campus, right? And that's dealing with harassment, that's dealing with integrity issues, that's dealing with prohibited bettor issues, that's dealing with gambling harm. And I hope we're moving into shifting into a space where we don't just tell the compliance person, make sure you educate on 10.3, and think that we're done. Those days are over. This is now a community of individuals like in this room that have to work diligently to combat this problem that we have in the U.S. today.
Mark. Jake, we are getting close on time.
Yeah,
so
I'm going to be quick anyway.
A few minutes.
It's going to be, connected to what Mark's saying on integrity. We work with a lot of integrity departments for obvious reasons when it comes to sports betting. I would be saying to institutions and conferences, it's ownership and being proactive. We often hear that social media abuse and harassment is not something that can be done anything about. That's completely false. You can, if you take ownership of it and be confident, just like the NCAA has. And so it's putting in policy and process around harassment, not just connected to sports betting, but also other types of abuse, and then putting in the real pieces of the puzzle around education, reporting channels, investigation, proactive monitoring.
Ben, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just quickly, I think one thing I always try to tell athletic department staff and student athletes too is that, sometimes I think there's this misconception, particularly for student athletes, that they think harassment is normal. Partially because I think pro athletes post about it sometimes. Kevin Durant will post, oh, this is the abuse I got this week and stuff. And especially for student athletes that are aspiring to be professional athletes, they think this is just part of the game. It's not part of the game. It's not normal. One reason it's not normal is because Kevin Durant does not live in a dorm with 100 other people that could be betting on his game. He's not going to dining halls and stuff where fellow students could be betting on him and suggesting that they take the over or take the under. It's just a completely different world. It's a completely different ecosystem. So make sure that you're communicating with your gaming commissions. Each commission is different, but I know many that have relationships with the athletic departments, that have regular meetings with them. So make sure that you're reporting this type of abuse, and then hopefully those gaming commissions can react to it. It's so much more helpful from my work when we can show them the abuse actually taking place. I could show them the tweets that Jake's flagging. It makes it much easier for me to then say, okay, now we have to do something about it. So it is not normal. You have to report this. You have to report this to your gaming commissions, and it makes our job easier to then create change.
Great, thanks, Austin. There's been a ton of great questions that have come in. As I warned at the front end, I don't think we're going to get to all of those, unfortunately, today, but this is really helpful for some additional resources that we could provide. I did want to maybe address a couple just really quickly that came in. Mark, I'll direct this to you. So it says, when a student athlete walks into my office and says, I've made a mistake and I've gotten involved with a sports gambling group, who specifically should the membership call in that situation? Is it the NCAA? Is it the FBI? You talked briefly in your comments, but can you walk through that reporting process?
Yeah, I think it depends on what they say and what they describe. If it's technical violations of 10.3, then you absolutely need to involve your compliance person. They can engage us. We spend a lot of time almost consulting for schools. I hate to use that term, but it's just walking schools through, like, I've got a kid who violated 10.3, bet on some pros. It's a violation, we'll deal with it, but, like, let's not think that that's a major integrity issue. On the other hand, if someone comes in and says, and this has happened, I've been approached by the FBI, or they've called me, or I'm involved in something, you certainly, I would say, get your legal counsel involved, but you do want to engage us quickly at that point. Our goal in any investigation, or I'm a little off topic, but it's important, is to find out what happened. It's less about violations, and we'll deal with that later. The main thing is what has happened and who needs to know. And so there's a triage thing. So if it's a real serious matter, you can certainly call me. I can help you through that. But each campus can be a little bit different, but I think the more serious it is, the more administrators and legal counsel need to be involved.
Great, thanks. Maybe right back at you, Mark, for one more, and I could touch on this a little bit as well. So what steps is the NCAA taking to support officials and referees that face harassment due to sports betting? I'll talk from my vantage point. Certainly our officiating community has been one of the key stakeholders that we've tried to support in this space. There's specialized education that we've worked with our partners at RQ Plus to provide officials. Certainly as it relates to Jake's work and Signify and our championships, we're monitoring for any abuse and harassment and threats directed at officials, and we've had a lot of those that have come through, help work to get those reported on to law enforcement. But certainly it's a space where we could do more. We're trying to create reporting mechanisms, whistleblower hotlines, things like that for our officiating community to be able to report those type of instances. So welcome any ideas, but hopefully that's a quick reaction to some of the work that we're doing with officials. Anything you want to add with that?
Just that we identify officials as a continuous gap that we want to really improve from the monitoring standpoint. So we're constantly looking at ways to better monitor that group. That's more from an integrity standpoint. And to that, we haven't talked about coaches here, but they fit in the same category. We talk about student athletes a lot, and that's important. But referees, coaches, and student athletes are all facing the same abusive.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think with that, we've reached time. I hope today's session has been really beneficial to you all. I know, speaking for myself, it's just an absolute privilege and honor to get to work aside these folks here. Hope you saw today their knowledge, their subject matter expertise in this space. So with that, if you don't mind giving them a round of applause for the session.
What's that?
Well done, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the convention.
Oh.